Let me invite our resource person, Julie ma'am. Welcome you, ma'am.
Honorable Principal Dr. Chako sir, Head of the Department of English, St. Aloysius College, Dr. Betsy ma'am, the Coordinator, Ms. Susan Joshi, all the faculty members of the Research Department of St. Aloysius College, and my dear students as well as all the alumni members and well-wishers. I'm really happy to be a part of St. Aloysius College even today. It brings me a lot of happiness and pleasure being a part after so many years of completing my PG in this institution. The warmth shared by the faculty members as well as by my friends there pulls me back to St. Aloysius College each moment. So I thank all of you for giving me this happiness, and I think it is a great responsibility today which has been shouldered to me to bring in the thoughts and academic innovative realizations of my research topic especially. And I think I am quite audible.
Yes, Julie, you are.
Yes, okay. So the topic that has been discussed today about life and death, and in between what? Between life and death, what is kept in between, specifically to a group of individuals, creating a lot of trauma within as well as to the surroundings, pathos, empathy, sympathy, and still they struggle to survive. And finally, they come out successfully into this world once again as survivors of illness. At times glorified, but at certain moments, leaving the impressions in this world. My topic of discussion between life and death, reflections on illness literature. Uh, I think this topic can be analyzed in this pandemic situation where we are all closed doors, and when we really understand the importance of freedom, the importance of fresh air, the importance of companionship, which was being blocked for almost a year. And in this background, I think I can begin with the representations of illness in literature. Illness plays a vital role in reality and in fiction among writers as well as among the characters throughout ages. Diseases like pandemic, plague, tuberculosis, deformities, physical and mental illness, AIDS, cancer, etc., are the most threatening ones in human life. Disease narratives, I think, can be divided into two phases. The older phase, where disease was presented through characters in fiction, in poetry, in narratives, in plays, and The characters represented historical importance, historical events, physical ailments. But later on, we can find a shift of thought and a shift of presentation of ailment and illness through writings of authors who themselves experienced illness. And that began from the mid of 1900s, where they themselves represented illness, and illness became metaphorically presented in various life writing works in the form of memos, in the form of autobiographies, autopathographies. So, illness is nothing new in literature. Specifically, I would like to quote Decameron, Boccaccio's Decameron, which represented Black Death during the 14th century. So, since literature of English developed from Chaucer, we can find the glimpses of illness and disease in various forms. With the presentation, I think I can begin this innovative session more effectively. Yes. So, Susan Sontag's writing, Illness as Metaphor, which was published in 1977, was creating a change or a shift of thought describing about illness. She represented illness in a very metaphorical manner, where death was considered as a very crucial element which is buried within our body, which is a fetus which has been induced into our cells. So, with that realization, Susan Sontag herself was experiencing cancer. And as she quoted, illness is the night side of life, a more vulnerable citizenship. Everyone who was born holds dual citizenship in the kingdom of well and in the kingdom of sickness. The realization that a person takes in the kingdom of wellness and in the kingdom of illness, and the path that has been owned.
Excuse me, Julie.
Yes.
There is some sort of an echo coming there. I don't know whether it is my problem here or is it the fan there or some sort of an echo is there.
Okay, let me check.
So your voice is clear but not very clear.
I hope it's clear now, ma'am.
I think it's better.
Okay. Is it fine?
Now it's better.
Okay. Yes. So as I represented illness, you can see illness in literature in various forms. While portrayed in literature, we can find that certain illnesses are being represented in a very metaphorical as well as ornamental manner, whereas certain illnesses are not glorified many a time. Some illnesses become picturesque, some become mysterious, and sometimes they also become more powerful in a very metaphorical manner, which was being represented by Susan Sontag. I think I'm clear, ma'am?
Yes, now you're clear. And are you changing
Okay.
the slides or is it the same slide?
Yes, I'll be changing, ma'am.
Okay, okay, okay. Yes,
Okay,
good. Okay,
that
now I
was
can
just
see
an
that.
introduction. Okay,
That's okay, great. Okay,
okay,
thank you. Thank you, sir.
okay, ma'am.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Continue, please.
Now, getting into a very formal presentation, illness narratives form a relentless part in human aesthetics. It has a unique place in the art of creativity of all ages of life, in all cultures, and in all fractions of human advancements. It becomes a consoling element, a catalyst between life and mind, which reacts to its most in order to bring peace to a person. So illness has been represented in various forms, and it becomes a solace for a person through writings, expressive writings, life writings, and memos and autobiographies. And it also gives solace to the disturbed, conflicting, confused, chaotic, disruptive, diseased mind. We can find that in the older phase of literature, we have got into or got introduced with a lot of writers who were literally ill many a time. But those illnesses were not directly represented in their writings. For example, we have a very known writer, Kamala Suraya. When she was writing My Story, she was actually hospitalized. And we have Sylvia Plath. Schizophrenic disturbances were throughout in her life. Then we can find Shelley, Keith. We know a lot more writers who were ill, but at the same time, they were more creative. And illness was not much represented through their writings. But they, through their writings, they were literally getting uh, solace to their minds, to their disturbed, conflicting, confused, and chaotic minds. And representing writing, it was very much different to each writer whom we can find in literature. It was not similar to the various writers whom we can see in literature. And also, at the same time, illness had has meant different experiences for writers like Thomas Mann, Albert Camus, Susan Sontag, Kamala Das, Sylvia Plath, and many more writers whom we can see through the line of my presentation. So, writing also played a vital role in the lives of the authors who were in. So, what was the importance of expressing the stories, expressing the narratives? How did it help the writers? That is what is being presented in the next slide. Judith Zarukis says that stories have to repair the damage that illness has done to the ill person's sense of where she is in life and where she may be going. Stories are a way of redrawing maps and finding new destinations. Definitely, we can find that stories of illness has always given a new meaning to the writers, as well as a very thoughtful and informative realization about life can be seen among the readers also. A renowned psychiatrist and one of the founding fathers of modern psychotraumatology, Frank Ochberg quotes that the stories people tell are important not only because they offer an unmatched window into subjective experience, but also because they are part of the image people have of themselves. So actually, they are creating a reflection of themselves. They are mirroring themselves many a time through their writings. And these narrative self-representations exert enormous power. They shape how we conduct our life, how we come to terms with pain, what we are able to appropriate of our own experience, and what we disown at the familiar price of neurosis. So this is a comment done by a very famous psychotraumatologist who analyzes the expressions of writers who are ill, who are sick, creating their own representations in their writings, and they are also identifying themselves. Illness literature is very much into the path of identifying oneself as a human being, and it is a kind of a metamorphosis which is leading a person to endure the trauma of the illness, as well as to bring in a lot of changes which will help the person to become a much more better individual. So that can be felt in many of the writings uh, which are currently written since 2000. We have a lot of illness narratives which give us descriptions about how how a change is created in the person's personality on the whole, in the form of a very holistic representation of life. So the next slide. But along with this, I would also like to bring in a description about the origin of illness narratives in a very formal manner. According to Anne Hunsaker Hawkins, book-length accounts of illness first became a distinct publishing phenomenon only in 1950s. As I mentioned earlier, it was only during the mid of 1900s that we started to receive representations from authors in the form of illness narratives. And the post 1950s thought were mostly self help books intended for patients recently diagnosed with the same condition as the author. And as Hawkins observes, they usually projected a positive attitude towards medicine. This is a combination of the narratives, medical narratives, as well as the creative narratives. So, from medical narratives, the ill, the diseased individuals shifted their thought or broke the formal restrictions from medical narratives towards creative narratives, and that happened only from 1900s. And before that, we used to find the representations in fictions, in literary works in a very historical manner, or at times the characters represented illness. And illness was not truly represented through the author in a very personal, autobiographical way. And later on, we can find writings since 1970s. We have a few writings which represented, like Susan Sontag's metaphor, illness as a metaphor. Then we can find a lot more writings which gave way to realize what illness really is. And a few characteristics of illness narratives, we can find the dichotomy of mind and body. Here, a person, when has been affected by illness, like specifically, I could quote cancer as a very a very important or maybe a very traumatic experience. Once received or once diagnosed, the mind and the body starts reacting in two different ways, uh, where the mind needs a lot of struggle to overcome the body's ailments. So this is the dichotomy which has been created in illness narratives also, which we can observe through the writings. I would like to quote the work of a very famous actor, Manisha Koirala, in her work, in her memoir, Healed. She was affected by ovarian cancer, and she successfully came out in a very wonderful manner. But I could hear when we speak about the dichotomy of mind and body, the person herself had a lot of dreams. One Since she was an actor, and her mind had urged a lot to go into her profession, but unfortunately her body was not in the right condition. This happens in most of the affected, the diseased individuals. And health and sickness, again, this existence, this realization of the disease. And distress and hope. Distress and hope, we can find the traumatic changes, it is mentally affected most of the time, and at the same time, with the willpower of the diseased, uh, he or she can come out of it. Where I would also like to quote the work of Innocent, in a very formal writing, Laughing Cancer Away, the book written by Innocent when he was affected by cancer. And there, actually, with a lot of humor, he shifts distress into hope. That is a technique which he introduces in his life itself in order to come out of this pathetic and the very crucial situation. Destruction and desire, both. The body has been destroyed totally, as we can find the Cancer Journal by Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde's Cancer Journal reflects a lot of physical destruction which she endured with the where the one of her breast has been removed, and she literally resists to come out of the trauma by identifying herself as a woman who has a lot of desires to live and to be successful in her life as a writer as well as a social activist. Then suppressions and expressions, acceptance and seclusions. Definitely, this can be seen in most of the illness narratives, where the society many a time looks in a very strange manner, sometimes in a very aloof manner, towards a diseased person. Like we have disease literature explaining about HIV and AIDS infected individuals, where the society itself keeps them away. Smallpox, we have writings on smallpox, and definitely the very situations which we have recently endured, the corona pandemic situation itself is a very good example for all such characteristics which we find in illness narratives. Another, some more characteristics which we can find, which has been keeping ourselves between life and death, conflicting about the existence, and also the fragmented self, like what next, what is our future going to be once a person is being affected by cancer or any other disease. What will be the future be? A life-threatening illness definitely brings a lot of confusions, a lot of disturbances in a person's mind. As once when we have an incident in mm, laughing cancer away of innocent, where he is a victim of cancer, and at the same time as he was into the process of treatment, suddenly he understands that his wife is also being identified with the same disease. So that was a very shocking moment in the life of the author. So such incidents give us examples for fragmented self, where you become shattered, you become very much shocked to overcome certain situations which come into your life, and the struggle, the struggle to survive, the struggle to survive, the burden of sustenance, all these are very much strenuous to come out of mm, such sorrowful, at the same time very much painful situations like disease. I shall bring in a few techniques that are found in narration in disease narratives. Narrative coherence, that you can find the technicalities of writing narratives, writing that can be observed in narrations of disease literature. You can find one element is narrative coherence. Narrative coherence is established by the interrelationship between plot, character, roles, and themes or values. In an illness narrative, the patient's family, and medical personnel all play a very important part to bring in the person a bit of solace, as well as to help the person. Actually, the in life memoirs, in life writing, you can find that all the support systems definitely help the person to evolve from this traumatic situation, as we can find in To Cancer with Love by Neelam Kumar, where she is actually coming out of such a traumatic situation with the help of her family and her friends. And we can also find examples of writer Paul Kalanity, when breath becomes air, his writing When Breath Becomes Air. We can definitely find the support of his family, his wife, who helped him throughout to endure the pain. Definitely, it is a very painful situation which he tries to endure and come out, but finally he succumbs to the disease. in a very thoughtful way. So, narrative coherence is definitely analyzed as an element, as an inevitable element in disease literature. Another technique which you can find is narrative closure. One aspect of narrative closure is the cultural resonance. The more familiar people are with the situation described, the higher the cultural resonance will be, and the more likely that others will be able to participate with the person whose narrative is in a way that supports, endorses, and elaborates the story the person has to tell. Definitely, narrative closure. I can again go back to Paul Kalanity's when breath becomes air, and the bright hour of Nina Riggs, where actually these two books were published posthumously after they passed away. So the family definitely, the supporters who understood the person definitely became the storytellers later. The rest of the fiction was actually added by their spouses. Actually, so it definitely gives us a very descriptive realization that the person, along with the supporters, would definitely help in coming in bringing out this pathetic and traumatic situation in a very successful manner. But at the same time, here the uh, authors Paul and Nina Riggs, were really helped by the supporters to come out to publish their books even after posthumously after their death. Another technique of narration in disease narratives, you can find a narrative interdependence. Narrative interdependence refers to interrelatedness of one person's narrative to another's. In families, one member's narrative is usually interrelated to the narratives told by other family members. It is a kind of the genre is kept alive with a lot of examples that you can connect with your inheritance, tradition, which it is found in most of the writings. When Nina Riggs was diagnosed with cancer, uh, it was actually the a kind of a string which has reached in that particular point with her, which had a tradition of cancer diagnosed people in the family, and which has given her strength to analyze and to overcome such a situation, such a very strong moment for herself. To her experience, uh, has observed a lot of incidents in her family itself. It has brought a lot of strength to overcome the pathetic or the traumatic situation there. These are the techniques which we can actually find in representing narratives of disease. At the same time, we have narrative styles, various kinds of narrative styles which we can find in diseased literature. The narrative style, as represented by Arthur W. Frank in his work The Wounded Storyteller, Body, Illness, and Ethics, which was published in 2000. He gives us a representation of various narrative styles that are observed in disease literature. The restitution narrative is perhaps the most preferred illness story form in Western cultures. It is about the perspective of diagnosis and treatment. and all that has been done is done if I mean, if the person overcomes the treatment situations, well and good. Otherwise, the treatment medicine becomes the star of the subject of such restitution narratives. I can quote Before I Die, fiction Before I Die, where a 16-year-old girl has been infected and actually she endures to death, but at the same time, the process that has been taken up and the form of treatment is very relevant, and it becomes very important to quote with regards to restitution narrative. Another narrative which we can find narrative style is chaos narrative style. Chaos narrative style gives us the shift and the rapid ups and downs that we can find in narratives. The ups and downs, again, I can go back to Paul Kalanity, where he himself is a neurosurgeon and he struggles being a doctor and also being infected by such a disease, where he operates people who are being affected by cancer. At the same time, he himself is a victim of cancer. So, and it is a kind of a very swift movement which which takes him throughout this process of treatment, diagnosis, and finally succumb to this cancer disease. Another narrative style is the quest narrative style, where the experience sets the body apart from others. In the story, the bond between the suffering and the vulnerability reaches towards finding oneself into what he or she really is. That is the quest, the urge for life, the urge for living, which we can find again, I can give you an example of Susan Debor, Susan Gubar in Memoir of a Debulked Women. Memoir of a Debulked Women. Susan Gubar is actually fighting against cancer in a very in a very perfect manner, and she comes out of this illness successfully. And the urge of living brings forth success to the character or to the author. Again, a few more narrative styles which you can see in disease narratives. According to Kenneth Gergen's observation, you can find stability narratives. Stability narrative is where the diseased the disease has a trajectory of stable existence, and the stability narratives where you can find that nothing much happens to the victim. The the disease has a very stable progress, with not much improvement, and at the same time not much, it doesn't worsen, the situation doesn't worsen much. There I can give the example of the narrative Healed by Manisha Koirala, where though she has been affected, the situations don't go towards a critical path. We have a next one. We have a progressive narrative. Progressive narrative is a movement towards incremental improvement. Every day, you can find that medicine is taking up the main role, and the person becomes cured to an extent, and the therapy that has been going on becomes gives enlivens, and the person gives a lot of vibrance in existence. Definitely, the work of Innocent gives us a very good example, and also To Cancer with Love, Neelam Kumar also gives us it is a good example when we speak about progressive narrative. Another one is a regressive narrative. The regressive narrative is a very frightening and very uncertain descriptions which you can find in narratives in the work Before I Die. Before I Die is an example for regressive narrative. So these are the main narrative styles which you can find, which is making us realize where we stand in between life and death. What is the stand that we can take, that a diseased person can take, starting from diagnosis of a disease, continuing through the treatment, and finally surviving. So a lot of questions arise about what particularly has this diseased person has to do in order to overcome such traumatic situations, physically, mentally, as well as the social situations, and definitely professional realizations. A lot of trauma get into the person through this one particular element named disease. So here is the question of this moment of putting in between life and death. I can now give you a few examples which we have observed throughout in literature, and I have categorized illness narratives into three groups. One, historical illness narratives, which you can find speaking about the events that has been found in literature representing illness, fictional illness narratives, and memos and autobiographies. Along with it, we have the recent form named graphic fiction, which also represents illness narrative. So historical illness narratives, I can bring in towards the example for historical illness narratives, The Plague, written by Albert Camus. It is the representation giving us a lot of experience representing through this novel about the plague, which was experienced in North African coastal town and during the 20th century. And this novel deals with a deadly disease destroying a French Algerian town. So these are the incidents give us a lot of information about history. Definitely, the history of a society, a nation, and also the trauma which they had to endure, and which they have successfully come out of such a disease. Then we have a Journal of the Plague Year by Daniel Defoe. It is also an historical narrative which gives us the descriptions about plague in London, and and how they came out of it. They were successful in their living. And the historical narrative, The Stand by Stephen King. It is also a very huge work which was written about a vast pandemic which was being found or experienced in America. Another one, Another one, Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which you may be quite familiar of, which speaks about cholera and which also gives us the descriptions about the magical realism. And another one, historical narrative is Pox by Michelle Zellrich, which states about smallpox, which had destroyed a whole state, and which also describes about the chaos that is being found and represented about a particular society in the United States. So all these are representing the historical events or the historical illness, pandemic situations which were experienced and endured by different social atmosphere and by different locales. And next is fictional illness narratives. The fictional illness narratives were actually introduced in literature during the 1950s. And Eric Segal's Love Story is one of the fictional illness narrative which you can find in literature, in American writings. My Sister's Keeper also is a writing which describes about illness narrative. And Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl. It is also a novel which speaks about the character being affected by leukemia. Then we can move to memos and autopathographies. As I spoke about Audre Lorde and the Cancer Journal, it was introduced in 1980, and where the character herself becomes affected by breast cancer, and also being a social activist, a lesbian writer, and also a person who participates in civil rights and also a part of feminist activities. She definitely, the work, the Cancer Journal has a very important place, secured a very important place in literature. Then we have More of a Debulked Woman by Susan Goddard. And and we have Paul Kalanity's work, when Black becomes air. The title itself gives us a realization about a situation where our breath becomes air, it is being turned into air. Another work, as I already represented, as Manisha Koirala's Healed, where the character herself endures a lot of trauma, being a very active person in her professional life. At the same time, the psychological trauma that she finds when she comes out of the treatment process, and when she actually realizes that how can she just urges to find a space for herself once she comes out of treatment. She is totally confused where to place herself in this the large canvas of Bollywood. So it is a very traumatic situation which you can find in life writing, where a person really thinks or rethinks about where one should place oneself with a lot of scars and with a lot of injuries on the body, as well as the mind is also being tortured a lot through the process of treatment itself. So all these situations give us a total picture about what is the importance of being and dying.
So where is um, the line between these two? How much struggle has to be endured in order to become survivors, in order to overcome disease, in order to be placed in a society which at times accepts and which many a time rejects. So all these are the questions which arise when you are being affected by disease. This can be observed in literature, in life itself. So these are the representations which you can find in disease literature and in illness literature. Uh, my observations specifically on Susan Sontag's illness as a metaphor and innocence laughing cancer away brings us or teaches us that a disease can be metaphorically represented, it can be glorified in various manners, but at the same time, we ourselves have the element of death in each and every individual, not only in literature, even in real life. So it can come out at any moment. So the way you face it, the way you have to encounter the so-called death is the success of your being, which definitely the writer Innocent has overcome in a very, very intelligent and in a very positive manner, which he took up the disease in a very positive manner, and he fought with his optimistic energy, and he was successful in the term called living itself. I think by the end of the day, we can come to a conclusion that happiness lifts people's spirits and strengthens their mind and body so that they will not succumb. So it is happiness, it is positive impulse, it is the strength, the willpower, the energy that you have buried within yourself, the desire towards life. All these positive thoughts will definitely help us to overcome such traumatic situations, and will definitely become, we can definitely praise the moment of existence, the moment of living. This was the suggestion proposed by the physicians of Black Death in 1348, where they realized that it is only through happiness, it is only through good spirit and energy that we can strengthen our mind and body. And with this thought, I think with your humble permission, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was really very informative. I think now we can move to an interactive session. There are a few questions in our chat box. I shall read it out now.
Can we ask some questions too? Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am. Definitely. Definitely.
There's so many questions as such, but I won't be asking all that. I just want to ask one question. That
Okay,
is,
ma'am.
you were talking a lot about illness narratives. I want to know about caretaker narrative, because you mentioned some of these caretaker narratives too, like Innocent and his wife Alice. And I think I remember reading somewhere how Alice had recounted that Innocent didn't cry when he learned that he had cancer, but he burst out uh, weeping when he learned that Alice had cancer. So, how was the trauma of the caretaker, which sometimes, especially when the caretaker is very close to the person who is suffering the illness, it might be equally or more traumatic than the deceased person. So, are there so many traumatic narratives of the caretakers too? I would like to know about that.
we do have characters which represent very strong emotions as caretakers. In these fictions itself, we can see that the parents of the 16-year-old girl in Before I Die, they are actually separated. Parents are separated, but at the same time, both of them, because of this situation of this child, they come together and they create a situation where this girl can overcome such a very traumatic situation. I think definitely caretakers are more injured. And on the other side, when we speak about the protagonists of these writings, I had to speak about specifically about the protagonists, but the history of the caretakers, it gives us a very different view about the disease, about the trauma that has been faced or endured, because it is through the caretakers that the whole situation is leading towards the society. It is a different perspective where the individual is not much exposed. It is the supporters who are exposed to the society, to the next circle of the locality. So it gives us a very different view regarding it. It needs a lot of understanding and observation when we speak about the psychological trauma that has been endured by the caretakers. Definitely there we can find situations where certain critical situations are being faced by the caretakers financially, definitely, which has not been that much encountered by the deceased. So it is a
Okay.
different
Again, I'm
kind
in
of
danger of
reading.
taking too much of the time and space, but still, I have one more question to ask.
Yes, ma'am.
That is, you talked about these narratives of the deceased persons. I want to know what sort of psychological help are available for one, the deceased persons, and number two, for those caretakers. Are there enough uh, psychological or rather mental support in our societies?
Yes, mental support is definitely from the nearest circle of people which the deceased can get. It is definitely the family. In all the through my observations, what I find is more than the situations or wherever they are placed. If they are placed in a professional scenario, or if they are placed in a political situation like Innocent, we can find Innocent here explaining about his visitors in his writing. You find a lot of visitors who come to pray, and finally they say that uh, you will be cured. Definitely, you will be cured. But the prayer itself becomes traumatic sometimes for him, where he doesn't encourage such situations. And also the flow of politicians. Sometimes even the people who are trying to support become a very negative, create a very negative impression on the deceased because of a lot of stories and experiences that they share. They start
Okay,
explaining
now I'll
about
keep
the
quiet.
incident. Yes,
You can
ma'am.
continue with the other questions and you can answer them. I'll keep quiet.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. I hope I am convincing.
Sure, you are.
Okay, ma'am. Thank
Participants,
you.
you can ask the questions directly to Julie ma'am by unmuting yourself, or else you can put your questions in the chat box. Already we have few questions in the chat box. Julie ma'am, we have a question from Amarnath Nair. He's asking
Okay.
that, does the fictional illness narratives do justice to being authored by one who has not who has Only a third person perspective, but tries to bring in a first person perspective through the characters.
It depends. It depends on the writer. Actually, we have a play named Wit. Wit was a fictional drama, but the way it has been represented gives us a very clear situation where the character is enduring a very traumatic mm, what to say realization of the disease, as well as the fiction that I mentioned, Before I Die. It is also a fictional narrative. I think there are successful writings which, and one thing I analyzed is that only those who have experience, have some kind of experience about disease, have written such fiction or writings, whether it is a fictional drama or a fictional novel. I think only those writers who have some experience regarding such situations have come up with such works.
Ma'am, shall I move to the next question?
Yes.
The second question is from Anjana Nilkumar. She's asking that, do you think the therapeutic writing can change the perspective of a person towards the traumatic illness, or will it be like a revisiting to trauma?
No, not at all. It is a kind of a relief that the writer gets through the writings. Because, as I told you, the older phase was where writing or creative writing became a solace to the ill writers. And that was a situation where they did not come out with their real emotions or the real trauma, the real disease that they were enduring in their lives. But they were more creative. But now, what happens is the person who is diseased is very well exploring into the arena of writing with a lot of passion, actually. With a lot of passion, they are expressing their experience which they went through, and it has also become a very supportive force for the readers who sometimes get into such critical situations. They can definitely connect to the writers, to the works of the survivors.
Ma'am, next question. What led you to opt illness literature as a topic for your research? And this question is from Sneha.
I found that not much observations were into this topic. So I found that we can do something while presenting my work, my thesis. I think I can do some kind of a contribution to the world of literature.
Now we have a question from Richu Vincent. You referred to narrative closure and coherence as techniques to deal with illness narratives. Is it that family relationship and interrelations that are an integral part of illness writing?
Definitely. Whichever work I have gone through, I find a very strong bonding between the diseased and the family, as well as friends. It is they who help the person to come out of such a situation. It is an inevitable element.
Okay, ma'am, I shall ask a question from my side. While
Okay.
dealing with this topic for your research, whether you had any kind of emotional breakdowns, because this topic which I have chose is not that pleasant situation that a person is dealing with. Though you are referring to survivors, all those books you will be reading will be having an element of course, pessimism in those people. So, what was it? How was your experience going through this? Have you ever felt that the topic I chose was not really suiting for me. Whether you had any emotional breakdown, I want to know that. I want to know how strong person you are.
No, definitely not. I hadn't given a second thought to this topic. Definitely with my guide, Betsy ma'am, I am moving ahead with this topic, and I wish it would come out successfully. And throughout, as you said, setbacks and all, throughout the readings, I have literally cried and cried and cried. You can't actually be a stranger while reading the books of deceased. You have to, I think, more than sympathize, you have to empathize with the works. Only then, it is only because of that that I am able to speak with a lot of confidence regarding my writers and my characters.
Okay, ma'am.